China's birth rate recently fell to its lowest level on record, which I'm dubious about because my TikTok looks like this. Anti-cancellation field activate! Also because didn't like 4 people live there during the Warring States period? But it's true. Official reports have China's fertility rate at about 1 birth per woman, with some unofficial reports claiming it could be less. Shh. But before you download Red Note and start commenting sucks to suck bald eagle emoji, China is far from the only country facing this issue. Italy, Japan, South Korea, Russia, Spain, the US. Demographic crises are ubiquitous and affect everything from your taxes and job prospects to whether you'll ever own a home, wars, dating, and even what kind of products get made. And once a country experiences low fertility, no government has ever been able to push it back to replacement. So let's talk about what this means for the future. Just to maintain a population, countries need 2.1 births per woman. Today, 2/3 of humanity live in countries below replacement level, meaning they never figured out how to have 0.1 of a baby. Also meaning their economies are See, it's not just that birth rates are falling, people aren't dying like they used to in the good old days. So you have a profusion of budding hit and runners on their way to deliver $30,000 in cash to Norton tech support, in addition to dinks dinking it up and societies perfecting their Mother Mary impersonations. This means we have more losers than ever in human history. Do you realize that Genghis Khan had 300 million children? I mean, even Elon Musk had sex 14 times. No, this means as birth rates fall and life expectancy rises, there are fewer working age adults per retiree. This forces younger workers to support much higher pension and healthcare costs. Think about it. In the US, the over 65 population is growing faster than the workforce and utilizes Social Security and Medicare. How do we fund those social services? Working adults are supposed to pay for it. So when we have fewer working adults and more seniors relying on it, the math's not...
Don't do it.
The math's not...
Stop, you're too old.
The math's not mathin'. This is called the dependency ratio, the number of dependents to the number of working age adults. Also called the old age dependency ratio when you take out children. But don't take out children. Leave that to the billionaires. So what about other countries? In China, people over 60 years old account for about 23% of the population, and that's expected to reach 400 million by 2035, which, to put into perspective, is about the populations of the US and Italy combined. So in 9 years, they might form a country called the Arthritic States. In Japan, 120% of the population has been around since the Paleolithic era, which forces governments to divert more and more tax revenue to pensions, and they're not collecting anything because nobody is of working age. Italy and South Korea have ultra-low fertility rates with no signs of stopping, even after significant spending on birth incentives. Italian is going to become the new Latin. Population decline is a massive problem for countries because it's not just untenable healthcare or social services that burden the economy. Fewer workers also means less capacity to produce stuff. It's harder to find employees, so companies scramble for workers or to rely on automation and immigration, which isn't always an option. And even if demand exists, firms can't meet it if they can't produce. Scarce labor can also contribute to inflation because companies compete harder for workers. They offer higher salaries, which increases wages faster than productivity. If productivity doesn't keep up, unit labor costs rise, and companies protect margins by raising prices. Service inflation is particularly sticky because things like healthcare or childcare are labor heavy and you can't automate them quickly. What else? There are fewer consumers and entrepreneurs to drive growth, public services and infrastructure struggle. But this is all boring. You know what? Let's look at the country most commonly used as an example for population decline. Japan is not necessarily unique. Well, I don't know any other country that has this. But for population crises, we're all taking the same road trip. Japan just started at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and the rest of us slept in and left later. So researchers look at Japan as an indication of what might happen in the future. Nearly 30% of Japan's population is over 65 right now, and its fertility rate is in the low ones. Remember, you need 2.1 just to replace your population. And it's been that way for a long time. In rural Japan, schools sometimes just close because there are no kids anymore, while the Japanese elderly live to be like that raisin in SpongeBob. They live forever. Today, Japan's old age dependency ratio is over 50%, meaning there's about 2 workers for every retiree, and the International Monetary Fund predicts a roughly 1-to-1 ratio of elderly to working age persons in Japan by 2060. Sorry, Tanaka-san, I know your shoulders are heavy from carrying 40 million seniors, but you can't retire yet. Great-great-grandma's 110th birthday is just around the corner. Japan lost its status as the 3rd largest economy in the world to Germany in 2024, and is now behind India as well. This is not entirely from their demographic crisis, but it contributes and scares the rest of us who are on this demographic road trip just a little bit behind. To put this in perspective, in Japan, sales of adult diapers outsold infant diapers in 2014. But hey, you're watching King Nioh. You're better than other YouTube viewers. You're smarter, more beautiful, more divine. I'm having a brain blast, you say, hitting the vape as your options expire worthless. Maybe I could get into selling medical devices in Japan. Maybe automated assisted living. Maybe there's an opportunity for silver entertainment. Maybe there would be if Prime Minister Takaichi wasn't cracking down on immigration. Though, to be fair, immigration has skyrocketed over the past decade to, 3%. And nothing is easier to illegally move to than an island. So the rest of the world is watching to see how Japan gets out of this. It's not like the government hasn't tried anything. They offered cash incentives like child allowances and subsidized daycare, more paid parental leave. They tried to encourage later retirements and bring elderly people back into the economy through things like silver human resource centers. I mean, I don't know what the hell this says, but if I were an old Japanese person, it'd almost certainly make me want to perform manual labor. What else have I heard about? Womenomics is a thing. This website defines it as a policy based on the idea that Japan can boost its economy by getting more women into the workforce, and they are rewarded with jobs and salaries that match their skills, talents, and ambitions. Whew, I don't know, Japan. That sounds pretty woke to me. Government-sponsored matchmaking parties, a government AI dating app, I don't know how that failed. So who knows, but the first big lesson for the rest of the world became once a country gets used to small families, high costs, and long lives, there isn't a simple subsidy you can offer to go back to 3 kids and a dog, and fewer young people report even wanting to get married. But if you're gonna be heavy-handed, do it like you mean it. Let's see what happens when a country tries to steer demographics more aggressively. For most of the late 20th century, demographic fears in China did not center around population decline, but people having to walk around in pairs on piggyback because the population nearly doubled between 1949 and 1979. And leg routines were not that well developed yet in China. So the government instituted a stringent one-child policy, which successfully boosted per capita economic gains and reduced fertility rates. Who could have seen that coming? Well, China's now facing 4 consecutive years of net population loss, with a bunch of old people hanging around doing Tai Chi at 6 a.m. But it's not just a one-child policy, it's much more complicated than that. According to social media, there's something called the Beijing Bikini. Also, China has very high education levels, and Chinese women participate in the labor force. This means you have to actually be witty to flirt successfully at work. This also means more years in school, so later entry into full-time work, later marriage, later first birth, and fertility is extremely sensitive to timing. Just ask Ben Franklin. For educated women, having a child can mean permanent earning loss, where companies want you to work 300 hours a week, promotion tracks are rigid, and employers may discriminate. Furthermore, educated parents invest more per child, and like any min, max, or nose, 5 sucky units are always worse than 1 good one. With China's hyper-competitive schooling, exam pressure, and social comparison culture, if you want to raise a successful child, you have fewer of them. Parents feel intense pressure to invest in tutoring, extracurriculars, and private schooling just to keep their kids competitive. Housing is extraordinarily expensive, and the cost of raising a child is enormous. One study finds the average cost to raise a kid to age 18 to be the 2nd highest in the world, and young people report job and income insecurity as disincentives to start families. And China is a bit unique because, unlike America or Europe, China's per capita GDP is much lower. Japan was a high-income society when aging peaked, but China faces shrinkage before reaching the most advanced stages of economic development. In other words, there's less slack to cushion the transition, so it could be way more painful. Okay, so if you were in charge, what would you do? The obvious first step is to remove the fertility caps from the one-child policy. Done. They did that. What next? Subsidies? Haha, nice. Really thinking outside the box. They did that. They sent people money for every child under 3. They tried cheaper mortgages and priority access to bigger apartments, extended maternity leave, lump sum cash bonuses, subsidized daycare, free public kindergartens, tax breaks. So let's assume throwing money at people didn't suddenly reverse the trend. What next? What about free childbirth care and expanded national insurance coverage for pregnancy? Maybe trying to make IVF more accessible. Free epidurals. They relaxed marriage registration rules in 2025. They tried framing having more kids as a patriotic civic duty. They increased taxes on condoms, which... haha, they banned effeminate men from TV. None of this worked, and the world learned that you can outlaw a 3rd kid, but you can't legislate a 2nd one into existence. At least, not until the clone factories are finished. So, we'll see how this plays out, but it's not great, and China's scale makes this a global issue. Think about how much you buy from China. So what does this mean for the US? The US is one of the later countries to get started on the road trip. It's younger, richer, and more demographically resilient than Japan or China, for now, but it's moving in the same direction. The US is aging, and its fertility rate is below replacement at about 1.6, but the population is still growing, largely from immigration, though America's certainly less attractive to migrants now than, I don't know, maybe ever. And as other countries age, the pool of potential immigrants shrinks and competition for talent increases. So the US isn't quite as bad, but it's speeding down the same highway. As in China and Japan, Americans are spending more years in education, meaning marriage and first births are delayed. Housing costs in America face regional bottlenecks. You can afford space in bum Mississippi, but high productivity metro areas like San Francisco, New York, Boston, Seattle have extreme housing costs. Funnily enough, educated young adults tend not to move to bum Mississippi for work, so they struggle to afford the space to raise kids where their jobs are, even if they want kids. Which they probably don't. With the US healthcare system being the 8th circle of hell, people can't afford to go to the doctor for cancer treatment, let alone have kids. I mean, pregnant mothers would rather bike to the hospital in tandem just in case than pay for an ambulance. There's no universal paid parental leave. Healthcare is tied to employment, so if you don't have good coverage and want a kid, get childcare is expensive. Everything is expensive. Young Americans have 6-figure student debt. They can't get jobs, and even when they do, career ladders aren't predictable. So even people who want or would be amenable to having kids require a prodigious financial buffer to make that long-term commitment. The government's population policy recently has been shooting citizens in the street and deporting, honestly, whoever, though economists have argued that's unhelpful. Immigration has kind of been America's demographic cheat code, but that lever isn't guaranteed forever. So who knows? Will there be higher taxes, smaller benefits, later retirement, more debt and inflation? All of the above? I mean, if you're under 40, don't count too much on Social Security, I can tell you that. But maybe AGI will come soon and our robotic overlords will keep some of us around for novelty. Subscribe to be one of the lucky ones.